Now it is my honor to present some well-deserved awards. The first award I'm delighted to present. Would you please come up, Dr. Ruth Miller? This is the Reverend Dr. J. Scott Neal Legacy Award, and sent to Dr. Ruth L. Miller for her years of teaching and making sure that the voices of our past teachers are kept alive. They are so sacred to us, and I am grateful to say that we stand on their shoulders, and people like you help bring forth those teachings that the world is yearning for. So thank you very, very much. Oh my.
This is absolutely wonderful. I love the notion, look, it turns. I love the notion that I can perceive the whole world with just one moment's glance. And I love that this is not set up in its usual fashion of the little tiny countries on top looking very large. Oh my. I entered New Thought because I needed to heal my body, and I didn't even know New Thought existed. But the inner guidance kept directing me to this place and this other place to get this pamphlet or that book or whatever. And one place was Unity Palo Alto, and one place was a religious science church in Portland, and there were various places, and I never was there on a Sunday morning. Every time I thought I was going there on a Sunday morning, guidance was very clear. No, that's not what this is about. This is about learning and applying the principles and the practice. And so, wow. This says, for her lifelong devotion to teaching the principles of New Thought. In a way, it's more like my life is, I am alive by practicing the principles of New Thought. I had a very lousy prognosis, and medicine wasn't doing anything. But practicing what Louise Hay taught, what Emmett Fox taught, what a number of other wonderful teachers taught, got me through it to the other side. And I went back into the world saying, okay, now I can get back to what I was doing. I think you all know what that's about. And after a couple of years, it became obvious, no. You're going in the ministry. I went, right. And then it ended up that I went into the ministry that taught these practices that had healed me. Wow. Yes. And I was hungry to know how they had, these men and women who had been teaching this 100, 200, or 150 years at that time, where did they get it? How did they get it? How did it happen? And I had this marvelous instructor, some of you know, named Jody Stevenson, who had us embody the teachers as our way of studying them. It was perfect because it really gave me that embodiment, that physical sense of this is what they experienced, right? And everyone in my class had different people, and some of us did more than one, and we all just woke up to a whole new level of understanding. At the same time, we were reading some pretty old 19th century stuff, and my classmates were not accustomed to Victorian prose. Fortunately, I was, and so I would slip them alternative versions, same material, but in modern language. So my very, very first translation was Lessons in Truth for my classmates. And that was amazing. And I went on and I did other things and I learned other things and I practiced other things, and then we had a little bit of a seminary, and we were training people in interfaith New Thought, and it was wonderful, and connecting with people, and we graduated our first class, and about 6 months later, 3 of the graduates came to me and said, "We miss classes, what can we do?" Well, I had just had an interesting experience. I'd sat down to meditate. I won't go too much longer. I had sat down to do my morning practice, and my morning practice is outlined in that little book, Spiritual Success, and it's study, silence, sharing, and then going out and serve. And I had a bookcase of wonderful books, and in whatever glowed was what I was going to study. So something glowed. It happened to be Scientific Christian Mental Practice by Emma Curtis Hopkins. I picked it up, I opened it up. I had kind of scanned it like we all did in seminary. And it opened up to about 2/3 down on that side of the page. And it said, if a client or a business affair returns to you a 3rd time, it's because you have been believing in falsehood, that something that appeared good was hiding something that wasn't. It was shortly after 9/11, and the current president had decided we were going to war, based on a number of things that I knew because I grew up in a family of Defense Department people, was not true. And I looked at that. My house had not sold for the 2nd time and was falling apart in the 3rd deal. I read that and I realized, oh my goodness, this book has spoken to me. And it was Emma Curtis Hopkins. So when my students came back and they said, we want to study something, I said, we need to do this book because every time I try to read it, I go to sleep. Right? She's hypnotic. Right? So we started to go through Scientific Christian Mental Practice. And then my daughter, who was going to medical school here in Bethesda, she said, I have to be gone for several weeks. Would you please come and stay with me? And I had this group trying to go through Emma Hopkins, and I was on the opposite coast. We were in Oregon, and they were, So I started sending them my annotations as they were going through it. But I was writing 3 or 4 paragraphs for every one paragraph of Emma. So then I just started translating it. And that's really how this whole thing got started. Not only this marvelous experience that Jody Stevenson gave us, but this amazing experience of just living with these words of Emma and her practices in a way that everyone around me could begin to understand. Well, and then people started understanding that I had done that. And the movie The Secret came out, and happened that one of my friends had recommended Unveiling Your Hidden Power to Beyond Words Publishing, and they went, "Oh, it's just a little too, but we really like what you're doing, and oh, by the way, the science of getting rich, nobody understands that. Would you do that for us? Oh, by the way, Charles Haanel's The Master Key System, nobody understands that. Would you do that for us? Oh, are there others that we need to do?" And that led into what is now 8 volumes of different 19th century teachers in modern language with exercises, and that was marvelous, a great opportunity. And I've gone on and done other things since, but that process of coming into something in the embodiment and then realizing that the ideas were totally in alignment, as I said this morning, with the principles that I was already practicing and teaching in my academic career. It was lovely. And so I feel like my life is the practice and the principles, and sharing it is my delight. And I thank you all for being one of the places I get to share. Wow.
Just be very careful, the globe is not attached.
I know. I got the whole.
In her hand she got the whole world. In her hand she got the whole world. In her hand she got the whole world in her hand. Blessings of healing. Thank you.
Start seeing visions in that crystal ball list.
I am.
I believe you.
And our next award recipient is receiving this piece of art, and it represents so much. He's given of himself in service for so long and in so many organizations, ranging from Divine Science Federation, Divine Science Ministers Association, and INTA, and some from your previous life before New Thought. We really appreciate you and love you and respect you, and we're so grateful for you. So, on behalf of the INTA, we'd like to present to you, I can't read the name of the torchbearer. I heard it just as it. Present to you the Torchbearer Award, and this is to Reverend Dr. Timothy Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. When, as this Congress was being planned, and I'd mentioned the awards time or two and there was no response. And finally, Reverend Dale and I spoke, and he mentioned this idea, and I said, well, I didn't expect that, and I wasn't asking. But the board voted this, and I had nothing to do with the decision to do it. So just because it's awarded this way, I wanted to make that very clear. And you know, I think so much of the path that we do this and the award itself. The history of this is it used to be called the Dr. Joseph Murphy Award, and it was called that up until the mid-1990s. That's a piece of history, and for those of you who know me, I really like getting into New Thought history. What do you think about that statement, JT? Okay. Because I can get into that, and there is a history behind that. There's not enough time to share it tonight. But it is an award that I dreamed of having one day, but never thought that I would at that point. But when you said something about all the different organizations, and I didn't write something out to speak up here. I just thought there's so many things that I could say. But I remember with DSFI, because when I came into New Thought, let me back all the way up, I was a former fundamentalist, Pentecostal, tongue-talking, pew-jumping, no snake handling preacher. All right. And I found at some point I got to something that it made absolutely no sense to me. And then of all things, I had noticed a woman, what is her name? Martha Creek. And I had just seen her out somewhere once, and at that point, Martha had a twin who was a country music singer by the name of Terry Clark. And people would see Martha Creek out and think they were seeing Terry Clark. Am I telling the truth, Martha?
Sometimes.
That's right. And we had a holistic health and wellness expo in Nashville. I had a booth there because I had a hypnotherapy practice. And another hypnotherapist in the area, we were sharing this booth, things were a little slow, and Wayne Dyer was the keynote speaker for that event. And I walk around, and the next thing I know, I see Martha. And I had seen her out in town just a night or two before that, and I won't go into where that was. But,
Thank you.
but I went over and spoke to her, and little did I know that in a few minutes, the woman that I am now married to was going to walk up, and Martha would introduce us, and that was going to change my life forever. Because just months before that, it hadn't been a complete year, Martha had started going to a religious science church and was in practitioner training. And she was inviting my wife to come over on Sunday, and of course, anywhere that she was going, I was going if I got the chance. So that was my beginning into it. And when that clicked and it made sense, I knew it was a life-altering teaching for me. And as things progressed, I studied religious science, went through practitioner training at Center for Spiritual Living Nashville, but I also had found divine science, and I started studying that just a couple of years after coming into religious science. And I decided at one point that if I was going to move forward and do a ordination and go through that path with divine science, that somehow there were things that I thought needed to be changed as I looked at the organization, some place for growth. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to set an intention now to go into leadership in those. And the first thing I know, I get ordained, and I'm almost immediately made the treasurer of the Divine Science Ministers Association. And I stayed in that position. I'm trying to remember, I may have gone to first vice president with that, or vice president. I don't know that there's first and a second. And served that time there. But then, while still in that position with DSMA, I was elected to the board, or actually, let me back up. We had a person who was vice president of Divine Science Federation International who resigned, and I was chosen to fulfill the rest of her term, which she had only served about 2 months of it. So I had almost a 3-year term in her spot, and by the time I'd served that 2 years and 10 months of it, the next one I was elected president of DSFI. And when I was, the outgoing treasurer gave her outgoing report, and she stated, I'll make it kind of a very plain thing, we've got enough money and enough income, the organization is going to be bankrupt in 18 months, and you just as well decide where the assets are going to go. And I'm sitting there thinking, she's the outgoing treasurer, and she's telling us this, and I'm listening, and when she finished, I thanked her. And I let her walk out the door, and I remember I was by the door, and I shut the door, and I kind of backed up, and I looked at the people who were on the board. And I said, the very first thing we're doing right now is to have prayer treatment. We are going to know that this organization is healthy, both spiritually and physically. And that's what we did. And from that point forward, we were told 18 months. That has been now 12 years, and they're in a better position than they have ever been. So today, if you're in leadership, make your first act always to be prayer. Always your first act should be prayer. and to set that intention, then those are the things that I look at. And when it comes to INTA, I remember the very first time that I went to the INTA headquarters. I had accompanied my wife, or actually we were going, she had a business trip out to Tucson, spent a few weeks, went up to Sedona and all this, and came back through through Phoenix and Mesa. And I decided that I wanted to go by and visit INTA headquarters. I'd never been there. And Blaine Mays took me over, and I went through the archives, and we came out, and as I stated during our archives dedication, I was absolutely sure that I had found the destination of heaven, and that would be where I would spend eternity if I died, was right in there among those books, okay? But as I stood there, Blaine got a phone call, and he had to go in, and he motioned, and I said, I just want to stand here a moment. And I stood in that bright Arizona sun, and yes, it's hot, but it does make a difference. There's no humidity. And there was a breeze that day blowing, so it really didn't feel bad at all. And I remember just shutting my eyes and the beauty that was there and the experience I had just had. And as I closed my eyes, I remember thinking, this is not about wanting Blaine to be gone or anything, but I realized that one day he would be gone. And I thought, when he's finished and done what he's ready to do here, I wouldn't mind, I'd really like being president of this organization. I stood there, and there was that feeling, and that, Neville Goddard calls it your wonderful human imagination, that it went through it just for a moment. And Blaine came back out, and that was it. And what's very unusual, though, is that several years later, Blaine invited me to be on the board, and I looked at it and didn't even send the papers back, okay? Well, I didn't send them back at the last minute in case he wanted to, but I really didn't much care about it, and Blaine had already gone on thinking I wasn't going to do it at all. So that was fine, and I never had any regret over it. And then I became the last person that he had on the board, put on the board before he passed. And then after that, two of the board members came to me and said, would you consider being first vice president? I said, I won't run for it, I won't ask for it. If it happens, it does. If it doesn't, I'm fine with it. And it did. The same thing next. So if we set our intentions, I've learned that we can really use this wonderful teaching we have and what those things are that we envision for the future. And that's what I tonight would just like to say. Everything about this talks to the power of what we teach and what we do. It has been one of my greatest honors and privileges to be president of this organization, to work with a board that I love dearly. Reverend Dr. Lisa talked about seeing some friction. Yes, we've had friction, but we've never stopped loving one another. All right, can all the board say amen? Okay. So tonight, I thank you for this honor. And to you, Madam President, know that I am never more than a phone call away if there's anything that I can ever do or offer. As I've been told numerous times, I'm really not going anywhere. I'm going to be around, but I'm going to enjoy just being me, going back to teaching and doing things like that. And it's going to all be a thing of a wonderful and bright future. No matter how good something is, we live in infinite possibility. The highest and the best in this moment is always less than the highest and best in the next moment. It's a continually growing process, and I know that that's true for INTA and for each and every one of us. So thank you again tonight. Again, I am so honored. Thank you.
Well, Shall we pray? Infinite Source, the I am that I am, knows the path that lies before us. May we be open and receptive in our hearts, be willing to move toward this magnificent future. Standing on these shoulders of our spiritual pioneers and bringing forth these teachings with the assistance of many teachers and leaders to bring new thought, principles to every home so that we all know that we live in harmony with one another. And there's more than enough to provide for everyone. And there is peace. So thank you that this is so.